Thousands of years ago, when chaos first came screaming into existence, it changed everything. Madness and mutation rained down on the world, twisting once beautiful and wholesome creations into horrible abominations. While this would one day lead to the creation of the nefarious Skaven and the barbaric warriors of chaos, the first mortal children of the dark gods were the Beastmen. Bloodthirsty amalgamations of animals and men, the first children of chaos appeared all across the world and ushered in the Age of the Beast. For thousands of years they dominated the dark forests, reveling in anarchy and madness so befitting of their forms. Eventually, however, this age passed, when the grand alliance of elves and dwarfs struck to reclaim the world from darkness, pushing back the Beastmen into the hidden depths of the forests. They could only watch with burning hatred as men reclaimed the world in their absence, building grand civilizations that stood in mockery of the primal past. The Beastmen warred for millennia against the various hated forms of civilization, progress, and peace. The world should be as it once was, drowning in bloodletting and madness. So the children of chaos have fostered this hatred, vowing one day to reclaim what was once theirs. So many Beastlords have risen among the warherds, yet all of these mighty leaders have failed to end the Age of Man. Even the legendary Gothor the Cruel failed to strike down the Empire of Men. However, within recent years, whispers swarm around the Darkwald that a new Beastlord has risen to lead his bestial kin. A beastman not only blessed with strength and brutality, but cunning and patience as well. The brave shamans proclaim this one blessed by the dark gods, a warrior to finally crush the weak nations of men. This great Beastlord's name is Khazrak the One-Eye, he who will bring about a return to the Age of the Beasts. The Houndmaster was born into the warherds that roamed the Darkwald, which spans most of the Northwestern Empire. In Beastman culture, the status a Gore receives in the herd is determined at birth by the crown of horns each creature enters the world with. Luckily for the One-Eye, he was blessed by the gods with two curving sets of bone protruding proudly from his skull. Clearly marked for greatness by the dark gods themselves, he was quickly placed with the other Gores to begin his life of violence. It only took a short matter of years for Khazrak to distinguish himself as a capable fighter among his kin, earning the name Foe-Render as his cruel blade butchered the uncloven ones in droves. With such prowess in combat and a keen intellect to match, the future Beastlord was quickly promoted to join his warherds Bestigors. Now equipped with some of the best arms and armor taken from their slaughtered foes, Khazrak turned his attention to higher ambitions. The warherd which he was a part of was led by a powerful brute by the name of Graktar. The Beastlord had long been directing the Beastmen of the Darkwald against the hated forces of men. Under his leadership, the herds had done well, feasting often upon man-flesh and spending many nights in drunk rituals beneath the herdstones. However, despite this, men still held dominion, slowly but surely pushing back the dark forests and building up their repulsive civilization. If the children of chaos were to reclaim their ancient hunting grounds, then something would have to change. As Khazrak grew older, he made a habit of carefully studying the leader of his herd. Following Graktar on numerous raids, he learned how to quell the unruly nature of the herd, and devise simple but effective battle plans. He watched and listened as he participated in attacks on caravans and raids on isolated settlements. All the while, Khazrak dreamed of one day usurping power from Graktar and taking control of the warherd himself. Yet, the Foe-Render is unlike most of his kin, in that he is patient and thoughtful, instead of the headstrong nature that defines most beastmen. He bided his time as foolish challengers were crushed beneath Graktar's hooves, or ripped apart by his horns. Khazrak watched carefully during each duel to learn the Beastlord's fighting style, and waited for the right time to strike. It would not be long until he received his first opportunity for greatness. A time for change came upon the warherd when the brave shaman Darkwald had foreseen the imminent rise of a true champion. When word of this reached Graktar, he knew that a number of mighty Gors would attempt to fulfill this prophecy, but none were truly a threat to him, with the exception of the war Gor Khazrak. Wary of the foe render, the Beastlord made preparations to ensure that a warrior of his choosing would be heralded as the champion, not the foe render. Word soon reached the camp that men were passing along what they called the Esterweld Road, a perfect place for an ambush. Surely this would provide a suitable testing ground for Darkwald's chosen to reveal himself. The warherd moved swiftly to the road, broken up into 3 main contingents. The Frontal Assault, which was the one most likely to reap the greatest of spoils and experience the heaviest fighting, was led by a wargor named Borzar. He had been tasked by Graktar to be this mysterious champion, and was hell-bent on proving himself. The Beastlord himself led the main body of the herd that would thrust for the center of the caravan, and Khazrak was given control of a force to the Uncloven One's rear. The situation was perfect for the Beastmen, for it was a heavily supplied caravan with a small guard, miserable from the constant rain and fog. They'd never see the attack coming, and were easy prey. As Borzar prepared his Gors and Ungors for the charge with promises of slaughter and loot, a thunderous thunderclap was followed by an unexpected sound. Cries of alarm rose up from the soldiers below as Beastmen slammed into their rear. Khazrak's assault was too soon. Borzar could only roar in dismay before a horn rang out somewhere far to his right, followed by further cries of dismay and the clashing of weapons. Graktar had made his move, and the fighting began in earnest. The wargor roared his Gors into action, crashing down into the front of the caravan and easily butchering the first young man who tried to hold him off. Borzar turned his gaze to further along the line and saw that Khazrak was cutting down the last of the defenders on his end. The Uncloven Ones in the front were still holding strong. If Graktar's chosen was to defeat Khazrak for the shaman's approval, he needed victory now. Pushing forward recklessly, he crashed into the defenders' ranks, swinging wildly in hopes of breaking their morale. Yet despite his great strength, the Uncloven Ones held the line with their superior tactics, and suddenly Borzar realized he had overextended. The wargor nearly was cut down before Graktar entered the fray himself, shattering the humans' resolve and ending the battle. Only moments later, a victorious cry rose from the back of the caravan. Both beastmen turned to see Khazrak standing atop one of the carts, raising a massive cask of wine over his head in victory. The brave shaman Darkwald stood beside him, nodding with approval. Graktar cursed softly before raising his own bellow to echo Forender's cry. Tonight, the herd would feast well on man-flesh and wine. With the shamans now backing his potential claim for control of the Bray herd, Khazrak continued to wait patiently for his chance. Graktar led the Beastmen of the Darkwald to another 2 crushing victories by destroying the villages of Gorsberg and Littenbad, before misfortune would finally set upon him. At the Battle of Helmgart, the powerful Beastlord would finally suffer a crushing defeat, forced to fall back as most of the warherd was butchered. Hoping to recover with an easy victory, Graktar then launched a small raid on what he thought was a poorly defended human caravan. However, the defenders were competent soldiers of the Empire, and before being slain, they managed to grievously wound the Beastlord. After the battle, Khazrak noticed Graktar was bleeding heavily, and immediately challenged him for leadership. Despite the Beastlord's wounds, the battle raged on for hours as the 2 Gors clashed. As Beastmen duels don't allow for any weapons to be used, the combatants must rely on their own strength and their curved horns to secure victory. Despite Graktar's greater experience, however, his wounds were too severe and the Beastlord was defeated when Forender ripped off one of his massive horns. Rather than kill his foe, however, Khazrak instead banished him from the Bray herd. The one-horned Gore was laughed out of the camp, humiliated and mutilated, never to be seen again. Rumor holds that he roams the Darkwald still, seeking vengeance against the foe render. Khazrak kept the horn as a trophy, and the resounding note it sounds when blown has signaled the doom of many unwary travelers. Now Beastlord of the Darkwald, the foe render launched a series of devastating raids all across the Dark Forest with terrifying success. He sacked the towns of Jägerhausen, Immelscheld, and Ehrenberg before turning his attention to a more difficult challenge. Graf Sternhauer ruled from an impregnable castle near the town of Gribbenhagen, a lord who had caused no small amount of trouble for the Beastmen when Graktar had led them. It took less than 6 months for Khazrak to crush the Graf's defenses, slaughtering Sternhauer himself and razing the entire castle to the ground. The Beastlord was a terrifying foe for humanity, for never had a Beastman leader proved as elusive as the foe render. No one survived his raids, for any who managed to flee the main herd were always hunted down by Khazrak's well-trained warhounds and torn to pieces. There were a few rare occasions in which various groups managed to track down Khazrak, but the Beastlord has always managed to slaughter them. Mercenaries, state troops, even the famous White Wolves of Ulrich proved no match for the cunning Beastlord. It wasn't until the year of 2518 that Khazrak would finally meet his match. Fed up with the constant Beastman raids tearing through his lands, Elector Count Boris Todbringer II initiated a purge of the Darkwald. Hearing of this bold challenge to his authority, the Beastlord rallied the warherd and marched to confront the insolent human. With a long streak of victories behind him, the foe render continued to raid villages along the way, for in his arrogance Khazrak believed he could not be caught. Todbringer was quite clever, however, and tracked the Beastmen's movement, preparing a trap for them at the village of Esterweld. When the Children of Chaos attacked, the men of the Empire sprang into action, surrounding the warherd and butchering them from all sides. Enraged, Khazrak leapt into the fighting with Scourge slicing around him in an attempt to turn the battle. It was at that moment that a glowing sword sliced through and crashed against the foe render's own blade. Todbringer had come for the beast's head. The two engaged in a dazzling display of skill, the Count holding his own upon his warhorse as both whip and blade sought a killing blow. Exposed and with his gores dying around him, the Beastlord could only keep up his assault for so long before an opening appeared in his guard. Not waiting for another chance, Todbringer lashed out with his rune fang, tearing out one of Khazrak's eyes and causing the Beastlord to stagger back in agony. That was the moment Khazrak foe-render should have died, but luck was on his side that day. As the Count of Middenland prepared for the final blow, Khazrak's favorite warhound, Redmaw, attacked the man's horse. The ensuing confusion allowed the Beastlord to break free of the fighting, fleeing into the forest to live another day. Khazrak's eye has never healed from the wound given to him by Boris. It has continued to weep blood and pus ever since. Such a handicap would normally be fatal amongst the brutal Beastman culture, but in Khazrak's case it only made him more fierce and careful. The One-Eye vowed revenge against the Elector Count and began to plot for many long months. Only when the perfect opportunity presented itself did he put his plan into action. With a series of daring ambushes, he lured the Count and his forces towards the town of Norderin. With Todbringer following his trail, the One-Eye had his herd double back overnight. He waited along with his herd until the men of the Empire began to break camp outside of the village, and then launched an all-out assault. Khazrak fought his way through the soldiers of Middenheim to confront the Elector Count. He threw Todbringer from his horse, pinned him to the ground, and with slow deliberation gouged out Boris's right eye with the tip of his horn. Satisfied with his revenge, the Beastlord retreated, and like Graktar, left his foe alive. After dealing with Todbringer, the Beastlord continued to plague the Darkwald, and the two leaders butted heads quite often. A few months later, Boris nearly captured the One-Eye, but Khazrak managed to slip away before the trap closed shut. However, the Elector Count did make a point of personally killing Redmaw, and hanging the Warhound's remains on the walls of Middenheim as an insult to the Houndmaster. Even now, Khazrak plots on how to repay this wound to his pride. Khazrak remains a dire threat to the Empire as the Beastlord of the Darkwald. Each year, his raids grow more ferocious, and he attacks a wider and wider area. It's only a matter of time before the entire nation of men trembles with fear at his name. Mankind will fall, and Khazrak the One-Eye will be the one who damns them. Now that we've run through the history of the One-Eye, let's take a look at his equipment, both of which he likely acquired after becoming Beastlord of the Darkwald, as leaders of the Beastmen get their pick of the cursed loot lying beneath the herdstones for mighty champions to take up. The most famous physical aspect of Khazrak would be his rather unusual weapon, a cursed whip titled Scourge. As with many pieces of equipment forged by the Dark Powers, this item's past is shrouded in no small amount of mystery. What can be said is that Scourge has been passed down through the ranks of the Beastmen for hundreds, if not thousands of years, as it has been wrapped in lethal curses by generations of Bray Shamans. With most of the God-touched mages living quite a few decades with ease, this weapon has likely been slaying the enemies of the Dark Gods for quite a long time. The length of the whip is also covered in cruel barbs which can tear out great chunks of flesh, even through the heaviest of armor, inflicting horrible agony upon those wounded by it. Scourge specializes in allowing Khazrak to strike many opponents at once with a debilitating blow that renders his foes helpless. It is likely the Bray Shamans focused on saturating the weapon in curses that focus on causing agony, debilitating opponents and leaving them to suffer a slow, painful death. Khazrak's other piece of notable equipment is the suit of mail simply known as the Dark Mail. Forged in ancient times by an unknown smith, the craftsmanship of this mail far exceeds the ability of the Dark God's average smiths, meaning it was likely Chaos Dwarves or some particularly gifted individual. It was created with a unique skill of absorbing magic from everything around the wearer, whether it be harmful spells or even the enchantments crafted into others' weapons. The Dark Mail can rip any amount of power out of a weapon, rendering it completely mundane, and leaving its bearer bewildered before Scourge tears out their throat. Truly, this set of armor fits Khazrak's preferred fighting style of surprise tactics, as far too many champions rely upon their own mighty weapons to take down such a powerful Beastlord. The Dark Mail also grants the One-Eye an impressive defense, turning aside all but the toughest of blows with ease, and with the negation of magical weapons, it is truly a tough shell to crack. That wraps up the relatively short equipment wielded by the Beastlord, so let's go ahead and press on to his skills. One of the lesser-known talents of Khazrak is that he's actually incredibly skilled at training warhounds. Although many Beastlords, wargors, and shamans rely on the horrific beasts for hunting escaped prey and other such tasks, none inspire the loyalty that the One-Eye receives from his pets. The training regimen used on the hounds results in terrifying brutes larger than most of their kind, who will do anything to please their relatively kind master. It was his most prized hound Redmaw that saved Khazrak from the fateful engagement with Todbringer that claimed the Beastlord's eye. Truly, this particular hobby of his has paid off quite well. It should go without saying that Khazrak is the master of the ambush tactic. The One-Eye is truly unrivaled when it comes to the art of catching his foes unaware and tearing them apart in a gory display of impressive tactics. No enemy can ever hope to catch the Beastlord in a fair fight, for if there's anything Khazrak is good at, it's luring any army into the perfect trap. On the flip side of this particular note, however, the One-Eye also excels at escaping rather hairy situations, should someone manage to locate him. In his entire life, Khazrak has only been truly caught once, when he lost his eye, and that event ensured he would never be so careless again. It's fairly unusual for a Gore to display such patience and cunning, but unfortunately for his foes, the One-Eye is truly the greatest Beastlord alive. Speaking of his mind, it should be noted that Khazrak is possessed by a bestial cunning unmatched by any other of his kin. The Beastlord is eerily gifted with the ability to control the unruly rage of his warherds, ensuring that the Beastmen of the Darkwald only strike when nearly every factor is well in their favor. Because of this, the One-Eye is able to utilize each of his Gores to their maximum potential, making deadly and efficient use of every creature under his control. It is primarily for this reason that no village, town, or castle is safe from his endless rage. Despite all of these positives, however, there is one particularly nasty habit that the Beastlord has developed over the course of his life. Ever since defeating Graktar, Khazrak has been overtly fond of humiliating his opponents, instead of just killing them when the opportunity presents itself. He tends to overtly enjoy challenges to his skill, purposefully letting worthy foes go in hopes that they'll face him again. Although this does serve to keep him sharp, it also populates the area with enemies like Boris Todbringer, who are actually capable of defeating him. It's likely that Khazrak would have had even greater success than he already does, if he could be bothered to actually kill those who threaten his position as Lord of all of the Darkwald. Now we'll go ahead and move on to Khazrak's famous battle, the slaughter at Grimmenhagen. The Darkwald harbors uncounted numbers of warherds, the chieftains of each vying for the position of Beastlord and the opportunity to unite all of the Beastmen in the region and rise up as one against the hated men. Many are the names invoked by the Bray Shamans: Kartok Greathorn, the Doombull Orgogoth, and the Beastlord Graktar. In recent years, another name has come to be invoked before the herdstones of the Darkwald. That name is Khazrak One-Eye. The deed that saw Khazrak rise to power is known to the men of the region as the Battle of Grimmenhagen. The armies of Middenheim had been persecuting the warherds of the northern Darkwald for several seasons, and a number of chieftains had attempted to unite the Brayherd in order to attack back. Yet Middenheim dwells aloft the Oryxburg Plateau, one of the most defensible cities in the Empire. Thousands of beastmen lost their lives in futile attacks against it. Khazrak bided his time, seeing that these men would be defeated not through brute force alone, but through animal cunning too. And so Khazrak launched a series of attacks against the less fortified towns of the Darkwald, burning them to the ground, slaughtering thousands of the Emperor's subjects, and turning many more into refugees. Khazrak's herds committed such atrocities that the men had no choice but to seek vengeance. It was only a matter of weeks before Khazrak's plan came to fruition. Khazrak gathered a Brayherd of 10,000 beastmen and attacked the fortress of Sternhauer Keep, yet he ordered his horde to withdraw as soon as he received word from his scouts that men were coming to relieve the keep's defenders. Khazrak split his horde into two armies. He led the first one north through the dark forest to a place near the road along which the army of men would be hemmed in by rocky, overgrown crags. The second Beastman horde Khazrak sent to a place several leagues south, where the road crossed a ford over a wide forest river. Even as his army mustered on the reverse of the hill overlooking the road, Khazrak saw the human army approaching in a long column, led by a phalanx of armored knights. It was the army of Middenheim, outside the safety of their fortifications, come to relieve their fellows at Sternhauer Keep. The Beastlord saw the enemy army was many thousands strong. He He felt instantly the bestial desire of his scores to be up and charging with animalistic wrath. Yet Khazrak cast his eye back at his army, exerting his control over the herds with a low, animal growl. 100 knights passed below, and regiment after regiment of foot soldiers followed. Still, Khazrak enforced his will, and his army waited, straining at the leash, but obedient to the Beastlord nonetheless. And then, as the last regiments passed by on the road below, Khazrak heard a great braying war cry from further down the road. He knew that the vanguard of the army of men had reached the other half of his horde. The Gors had succumbed to their bestial nature, as Khazrak had known they would, and had charged forward into the open ground before the ford, and were even now tearing into the army of Middenheim. Bellowing his own war cry, Khazrak leaped down from the rocks onto the road, landing a mere yards behind the column's rearguard regiment. An instant later, his army landed behind him with a thunderous report of several thousand pairs of hooves slamming into the ground. Within moments, the Beastmen were charging the startled men, cutting into the disorganized regiment with savage abandon. The battle that followed saw the army from Middenheim utterly defeated. The 100 yards or so of open land cut back on either side of the road became a blood-soaked killing ground. The knights had scant time or even room to bring a charge to bear. Darting Ungors cut their horses from under them, before the mighty two-handed axes of the Bestigors hacked into the flailing knights. Khazrak's horde drove through the humans' rearguard, cutting men down with frenzied barbarity. The time for low cunning now passed. So complete was the slaughter that the two hordes of beastmen came face to face, having slaughtered their way through the entire human army. And so hot was their blood that they near fell upon one another in their lust for battle. It is said that only Khazrak's animal dominance and the threat of his vicious whip scourge stayed the hand of the beastmen and averted the kinslaying. Looking upon the bloody work he had done, Khazrak waded through the broken, bloody corpses of hundreds of men and horses, and lifted from the ground a stained, ragged flag. This he knew to be the magical banner carried by the armored knights who had led the army. Khazrak knew that such things were of value to men, and so he ordered it carried away from that place of slaughter, to be planted before one of the sacred herdstones in the depths of the Darkwald. Such a thing would do great honor to Chaos, and serve as a mocking taunt to all that men held dear. With the famous battle segment out of the way, we can now move on to the end times. As is the norm, I will be putting a clickable link right here on, let's say, Khazrak's face, that if you do not care for the end times or intend to read it at some point and don't want it spoiled, you can simply click and it will carry you to the end of this segment. Khazrak's participation in the end times was rather short. So, for those of you who have stayed and wish to know what happened to the One-Eye during the end times, it's actually a pretty simple story. Due to a various circumstance of events, Boris Todbringer basically went insane while defending Middenheim from the Skaven, as they were launching assaults all over the place in the old world. When Volten and Gregor Martark arrived to relieve the defenders of Middenheim, Boris Todbringer had become so stir-crazy that he made Volten the new official guardian, the new lord of Middenheim, and took some of his best soldiers, though not too many, and immediately launched out to find Khazrak the One-Eye. Boris had gone so insane that he believed that Khazrak was responsible for the entirety of the end times instead of Archaon, who was actually responsible. When Boris arrived in the Darkwald, word spread among the Beastmen very quickly that he was on the move, and the force with him was not terribly large. When word reached the getting older Khazrak, the Beastlord decided to make his move. The game the two of them had played had been quite fun, but the world was ending, and the dark gods demanded more than just a single soul. So, Khazrak decided it was finally time to end the game between the two of them. He set up a rather nasty ambush for Boris Todbringer, and in his madness, Todbringer fell for it hook, line, and sinker. He ended up charging after a small group of Ungors that he found in the forest because he was so eager for battle. And when he finally struck the Ungors, he realized that by charging so suddenly, he had stretched out his own line and was caught in a place where the cavalry were not quite able to make full use of their mounts. It was here that Khazrak launched his own counter-assault, tearing apart Boris's own men with relative ease. It was at this moment that Boris realized he had made a terrible mistake and had doomed Mindenheim without his leadership and guidance. But such things were past now. He challenged Khazrak to a duel, and of course Khazrak accepted, because the two of them hated each other so much and wanted nothing more than to be the end of one another. They fought a rather long and engaging duel. Well, it wasn't terribly long, I suppose, but as far as duels in Warhammer go, it was of medium distance. The two of them traded blows, but in the end, Boris's superior tactics and close combat won the day, as he did not fall for many of Khazrak's tricks and was able to avoid the lick of Scourge, because he had fought Khazrak many times before. He managed to cut one of Khazrak's upper thighs out from under him, which caused the Beastlord to stagger. Once Khazrak was upon the ground, he lost a lot of his superior physical advantages, and Boris was able to straddle him and put the Mindenheim, well, the Mindenland rune thing through Khazrak's remaining eye and into his brain, thus killing the Beastlord instantly. Thus fell Khazrak the One-Eye. One day we will do a video exploring Boris Todbringer, and we will talk about what happened to Todbringer after that. It's a pretty short little snippet, but we'll save that for then. So all you really need to know about the end times was that Khazrak basically managed to successfully lead to the death of Boris Todbringer. But he died during his final duel against the Elector Count, and that was the end of the Beastlord of the Darkwald. Alright, hopefully everyone's rejoined us, whether you skipped the end time section or just finished watching it. Let's go ahead and talk about Khazrak within the scope of Total War. Obviously, if you are not playing the game or have not played it, he's a playable character at the moment, and I would say he's quite a fun one on top of it. Khazrak is pretty straightforward. He's the faction leader for the Beastmen and is the melee-focused lord, while Malagor makes up your more casting-focused character. I would say Khazrak definitely has the easier of the two campaigns, as he starts within Estalia, which is one of the human realms, whereas Malagor starts over down in the Badlands, surrounded by greenskins and dwarves to the north. Humans definitely are easier prey for the Beastmen. They struggle pretty hard against greenskins on average. So Khazrak not only starts in a good location, but unlike Malagor, he starts relatively close to his quest battles for Scourge and the Darkmail. For most people, I would highly recommend taking Khazrak as your first lord. He's extremely reliable. He's the best melee combat character in the Beastmen roster, and he is one very dangerous character. Especially once you're able to get poisoned attacks on him, either through the Pox Carrier follower or through Scourge. He can pretty much one-on-one almost any character in the game. Without the poison, he probably won't win, but if you can actually get him up on the poison, he should be able to carry the day, unless it's a very well kitted out combat version of the likes of Vlad von Karstein or Archaon the Everchosen. That being said, he also provides your army with some pretty fantastic benefits through the use of an ability called Bestial Cunning, which provides pretty nice buffs. And he also, quite frankly, just makes her a really solid lord and makes Bestigors cheaper, which is fantastic, for Bestigors are a very hard-hitting unit. They're not very defensively able, but if you can protect them by screening them with gores or with other large things, then you might be able to get them into the meat of the combat, which can provide for some pretty excellent things. That being said, I do enjoy Khazrak a good bit. I like him more than Malagor, especially because Malagor is the Lord of the Wild, which is okay, unfortunately, in its modern version. But Khazrak is a very solid pick. Very good in close combat. He's got excellent skills. Of course, his starting location is the better of the two. And he also is who you require for the Beastman win condition. Which, if you've never played a Beastman campaign, you actually have to complete a quest battle, regardless of who your starting lord is, called the Fall of Man. And what the Fall of Man is you have to fight a combined army of Bretonnia and the Empire, led respectively by Lewin Leoncoeur and Karl Franz. And if you defeat them, you can complete a Beastman campaign, but you cannot achieve true victory until you've completed that quest battle, and you have to play the quest battle with Khazrak the One-Eye. You are not able to play it with Malagor the Dark Omen, and I doubt you'll be able to play it with any future DLC Beastman characters. So it is crucial to get Khazrak in your campaign and to level him up to a pretty reasonable standard. In Total War, he's also able to ride on a Razor Gore chariot, which he's not able to do in Tabletop. In Tabletop, he's actually a pure foot unit. You know, he's only an infantry unit. You're not able to ever mount him on anything, which is kind of a shame because it's a pretty cool idea in Total War. Putting him on a Razor Gore chariot 9 times out of 10 is the better plan. It gives a major boost to his health and improves a notable amount of his stats, and his charge also becomes devastating. Also, it makes him immune to getting knocked over, which is always a huge plus. That's definitely always a frustrating problem you'll run into when dealing with, especially in that final fight, you have to fight Karl Franz on Deathclaw and Lewin Leoncoeur on Biaki. So it's definitely preferred to put Khazrak on the chariot so that when those monstrous mounted characters come after him, he's able to hold his own ground. But in any event, that pretty much wraps up everything I've got for Khazrak the One-Eye. I hope you guys all enjoyed the video. I do want to take a quick moment here to thank my patrons over on Patreon for their continued support of this channel. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do these sorts of videos. They just take a long time. I have to buy certain books and have to look up various passages and find things that are out of print. It typically takes a very, very long time and is a rather difficult amount of work. So I am extremely thankful to my patrons for allowing me to pursue this interest. And I would ask that if you watch these videos and you enjoy this content, you consider becoming one. They, of course, will have access to this video quite a few days earlier compared to everyone else. So if you like these lore videos, which there will be more of coming out on a more regular basis due to some recent changes, then I hope you'll consider becoming a patron over on Patreon, which of course I will include a link to in the description below, and I'll probably have one posted up here that you can just click very easily. But in any event, thanks everyone so much for watching. Thank you for your continued patience, your continued support, and all of those wonderful things. More fun stuff to come in the future. Please keep an eye on my Twitter account for upcoming news about what videos are coming next, when I'm streaming, and all of those other fun things. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to let me know your thoughts, anything you found interesting, and all of that stuff down in the comment section below. Thankfully, this video was not as long as some characters who run over an hour time limit. I'm glad Khazrak ended up wrapping up at about a nice solid 40 minutes. So thank you all for watching. I'll see you around. Take care of yourselves, and have a wonderful evening. Bye.